Denver, it finally happened. The NWSL is coming to the Mile High City, and Denver Summit FC is officially on the map. For the first time, Colorado has a top-tier professional women's soccer team to call its own, and honestly, it is about time. Welcome to the 5280 Pitch Women's Soccer at Altitude. I'm Kate Hansen, a lifelong Coloradan podcaster and a very unapologetic fan of women's soccer. So if you're new here, this show is all about Denver Summit FC and the NWSL. We're going to be talking about the team, the league, the stories, the stadium drama, the player signings, and eventually every single match once the season starts. And just to be super clear right from the start, this is not the official podcast of the Denver Summit FC, and I don't work for the club. I don't speak for the club. I'm just a fan who loves the game, who loves this city, and I wanted to have a place where other fans could plug in, stay informed, and feel a part of this fun from day one. So in this very first episode, we're going to zoom out and answer three big questions. Number one, how did Denver actually land an NWSL team? Number two, who is behind the Denver Summit? And what does that ownership group tell us about the ambition of the club? And then number three, why does this make so much sense for Denver to have an NWSL team right now? So think of this as your origin story episode, the foundation before we start diving into players, tactics, and all the fun nerdy stuff. So, all right, let's start with how we got here. If it suddenly feels like Denver got a women's pro team, the truth is there's nothing sudden about it. This started as a real grassroots effort. Back in 2022, a group called For Denver FC formed with a pretty simple goal: prove that Denver deserved a professional women's soccer team. They hosted watch parties, they built a community, and they were very, very loud and very intentional about showing the league that there was demand for women's professional soccer here in Colorado. Behind the scenes, they pulled together a serious investment group. So people like Rob Cohen, who we'll talk about more in a minute, and others from the finance, sports, and business worlds. So this was not just a let's see what happens kind of bid. This was organized, strategic, and very, very public about Colorado wanting the NWSL, not just any league, specifically the top league in the world for women's soccer, to come to Denver. And in November of 2024, Denver was announced as one of the finalists for the league's 16th franchise, alongside cities like Cincinnati and Cleveland. And then on January 30th, 2025, it became official. Denver was awarded the NWSL's 16th team, set to play in 2026. And with that announcement came a very big number. The ownership group paid a reported record expansion fee of about $110 million to bring this club to life. Now, that number matters because it tells you two things. One, that the NWSL is growing up fast, and expansion, it is not cheap anymore. And now number two, that this ownership group is not dabbling. So they are heavily invested, both financially and reputationally, in making this work. There's also a piece of this story that's bigger than soccer. So Denver Summit FC will be the first major league professional women's soccer team in Colorado since the Colorado Explosion, a women's basketball team, and it sadly folded back in the late 1990s. So this is not just another team logo being added to the wall. This is women's professional sports returning to Colorado in a very real way. So that's the how we got the team part. Let's talk about who actually owns Denver Summit FC, because this group is really fascinating. So on the club's site, Denver Summit describes itself as having a quote-unquote robust ownership group. That includes both local and national investors. It sounds like marketing language, but in this case, it's true. So at the top of that group is Rob Cohen. He is the chairman and CEO of IMA Financial Group, which is a major insurance and risk management firm headquartered here in Denver. And if you are thinking to yourself, IMA, that kind of sounds familiar. Well, if you're a Colorado Avalanche fan, they are wearing the IMA logo on their jerseys. So he's been deeply involved in sports in this city for a long time. not just as a fan, but who helped bring events like the All-Star Games and different major tournaments to town. So, fun fact, he even founded the Denver Sports Commission years ago to attract national and international events here. So, when you hear his name attached to this project, it's not random. It is very on brand for Rob Cohen. This is someone who has spent a lot of time thinking about how sports can elevate a city's profile, bring people together, and drive economic impact. Then you've got project level, which is tied to Mellody Hobson and Jason Wright. If you follow business and sports at all, you've probably heard Melody's name before. She is the co-CEO and president of Ariel Investments. She's involved in many different pro sports ownership groups and Project Level's mission that is literally about investing in women's sports and leveling the playing field. It's not subtle. That is a statement about where they think the future is. There's also the Borgen and Moritz families, who were closely involved with the 4 Denver FC group from the very early days, long before this was a done deal. They bring local investment, but also that community-focused, we want this for Colorado energy. Add in different ownership parties like Nalima Joshi and Darian Javeri, who have backgrounds in finance and also hold stakes in other pro sports franchises, and people like Molly Coors, a fifth-generation Coloradan, and the name like Coors, you all know who she is tied to. The Coors family has deep sports ties. You start to see a theme, and it's a coalition of people with experience in business, sports, and community work who are putting their names on the line to build something that lasts. And then, of course, there are 2 names that grabbed all the headlines, Mikaela Shiffrin and Peyton Manning. So Mikaela joined the ownership group first. She is one of the greatest alpine skiers of all time. Full stop. I mean, she's from right here in Colorado. And having her invest in women's soccer sends a huge message, especially to young athletes in this state. It says women's sports are worth backing, not just with, the social media posts, but with money and influence. And then Peyton Manning came in. You probably don't need his resume from me, but we're talking about Hall of Fame quarterback, Denver Broncos legend, someone who could have put his name on just about anything, and he chose to align himself with this club. So when you put all of that together, a serious local business leader, mission-driven investment group focused on women's sports, Colorado families who helped drive the bid, and then 2 of the most recognizable names in modern sports, well, you get a very clear picture. Denver Summit FC is not just some token project. It's not a side hustle. The ownership group is built to send a signal, and we're here to compete. We are here to grow, and we are here to make women's soccer a central part of Denver sports identity for a very long time. And I want to talk about the Denver Summit branding just for a second, because this is one of my favorite parts of the Denver Summit story. The name Denver Summit FC was not cooked up in a boardroom and dropped on fans out of nowhere. The club went through a very public name the team process where supporters could vote and submit ideas. And there were names that came up like the Denver Gold, Denver Elevate, Colorado 14ers. Those were all in the mix. And in the end, Summit got the most first place votes, and that is what they went with. So more than 15,000 votes and suggestions came in during the process, which is a pretty wild level of engagement for a team that didn't even have a roster yet. I remember, like I said, I am a lifelong Coloradan, and I remember when the Colorado Avalanche first came to Denver and the whole voting process and getting to choose a name. And it's really fun when ownership groups allow you to take part in what the new team name is going to be. I think it really helps build that fan base. So I love the fact that Denver Summit did encourage the fans to have a voice in what the name of the team was going to be. And I want to talk a little bit about the crest. So if you haven't seen it yet, go ahead and pull it up because it's loaded with symbolism. So at first glance, you see a mountain range, a bright sun, and then this bold sky behind it. But there are little details in this crest that tell a story of this team. So the angle of the mountains, that's not random. they're tilted at a 26-degree angle as a nod to 2026, the inaugural season. And then the colors echo Colorado sunsets and the Red Rocks formations, and then the green for the Colorado license plate. Although, I don't know, I mean, about you guys, but I feel like I see tons of those black and white Colorado license plates now. But the Colorado green is the main license plate here for Colorado with the White Mountains on it. So I love that they chose to incorporate the green. We've also seen the Colorado Rockies incorporate the green into their city series. So I love that the license plate green is one of the main colors for the summit. And then I want to talk about the secondary logos. So there's one that leans into 5280, and there's another that plays off the letter D. So even in branding, you see this combination of local pride, altitude, and ambition. And why does that matter for us as fans? Because really, branding is how a club tells you who they want to be before a ball is ever kicked. Summit is about climbing, it's about pushing upward, it's about the idea that there's always another level. And in a league that is getting more and more competitive every single year, that's exactly the mindset you want to have for a brand new team. Now, let's get into the bigger why Denver question, because I think this is where the story really clicks. From the league's perspective, Denver checks a lot of boxes. So you have a growing metro area, you have a proven sports market, an existing soccer culture with the Rapids, and a huge youth soccer scene, and a region that didn't have a major women's pro sports team. But we didn't. We didn't have a professional basketball team. There's no baseball, nothing. So for Colorado to have their very first professional women's sports team be an NWSL team, I think is a huge deal. You also have altitude, which is not just a fun tagline. It is a very real competitive factor for teams traveling here. And this is something that Denver has used to its advantage in other sports for years. I know, whenever I go into the Broncos, go to a Broncos game, I see, there's at the beginning of the game, they say, warning, altitude warning. And a lot of that's to get into the opponent's heads. And I mean, there's a reason why we have so many Olympic athletes train in Colorado Springs. It's no joke that playing at altitude is an advantage. And on top of that, the timing is perfect. So interest in women's sports is exploding right now, not just in Colorado, but nationally. Attendance records are being broken across leagues, media coverage is improving, and there's more data than ever before showing that if you actually promote women's sports, people show up. I mean, Caitlin Clark has been huge for the WNBA. And then think about how the U.S. women's national team, I know that every time that they come to Colorado, we are going to go and see that game. It doesn't matter if they're playing China, Australia, I don't care who they're playing. I want to see the U.S. women's national team play, and they sell out that stadium every single time. People are craving more women's sports. And the Denver Summit is already a case study in that. Before the team has played a single match, they have reportedly surpassed 15,000 season ticket deposits, which is a new record for an NWSL expansion team. That is a loud and clear message from fans in this region saying, we want this. We have our season tickets. Multiple families have season tickets. There's something to be said about seeing, if you have a daughter in sports, about seeing a professional female play. And there's also a global piece to this. Denver has been mentioned in conversations about potential host cities for future Women's World Cups, and the city is trying to position itself as a place that can host major international events at Empower Field and beyond. So Empower Field is where the Broncos play. And when you layer a professional women's club on top of that, it strengthens the case that Denver is not just a sports town, but a women's sports hub in the making. From a storytelling standpoint, it just fits. You have the mountains, you have the elevation, the idea of climbing to the summit, the 5280 identity. You can feel the brand clicking into the city in a way that a lot of expansion teams honestly wish that they had. And we can't talk about a new club without talking about where they are going to play. So I want to talk about the stadium story. The long-term vision is a purpose-built 14,500 seat soccer stadium at Santa Fe Yards. And if you haven't followed that, Santa Fe Yards is a site south of downtown where, if you're a longtime Denver resident, the Gates Rubber Factory used to be. But it's tucked between I-25 and Santa Fe. And the plan is not just for a stadium, but for a whole sports and entertainment district around it with a park, mixed-use development, and a real gathering place feel. So it would be the first stadium in Colorado built specifically for a women's professional team. And that is the dream. That is the where we're going to stay statement. But the time of this recording, stadium projects are never simple. Right now, the club is working through all the approvals and public funding questions that come with a project of this size. There have already been moments where city council votes have been delayed, where the team has hinted that if things should take too long, they may need to look at alternative locations outside of the city for that permanent home. Ugh. So this is not a done deal until shovels are in the ground. But in the meantime, here is the path. The club has announced that their inaugural home in 2026 is going to be a temporary 12,000 seat stadium next to their training center in Centennial for the first couple of seasons before eventually moving to the Santa Fe Yard Stadium once it's built. But get this, the very first game is going to be held at Empower Field at Mile High. So the very first Denver Summit match will be where the Broncos play. And how cool would it be if we could just fill that stadium for our brand new team? So if you haven't gotten tickets yet, be sure to grab some tickets. After that, they will be playing at their new stadium, the 12,000 seat stadium in Centennial, which they did sign a agreement with the Cherry Creek School District. So once they are done building the Santa Fe Yard Stadium, the Centennial Stadium is going to be used by Cherry Creek School District. So again, big picture, you see the ambition opening at Mile High as a statement, playing in front of potentially tens of thousands of fans for your first ever home match. That is not normal in women's club soccer, and it fits perfectly with the record ticket number deposits and the level of interest that we have already seen. So as fans, we're going to keep watching the stadium story evolve because it is a huge part of the club's future. But in terms of what it tells us right now, it says that this organization is thinking big and it expects the community to show up in a big way too. So let's pull all of this together. You have a city that has quietly been a soccer town for a long time, from youth clubs and the Rapids to World Cup watch parties and grassroots supporter culture. You have an ownership group that is a mix of local leaders, national investors, and sports icons who did not have to put their names on this, but they chose to. You have a league that is growing, maturing, and is ready to put serious resources into new markets. You have a stadium plan that, if it comes together, would give Denver one of the most significant women's sports venue in the country. And you have a fan base that has already raised its hand, put down deposits, and said, yep, we are in. So when you stack all that up, the real question isn't why Denver, it's how did this not happen sooner? And from my perspective, this moment matters for a couple of reasons. So first, representation. Little kids in Colorado can now grow up with a women's professional team in their backyard. They can see Summit players on billboards, on social media, on the pitch, and see a path for themselves in sports. And whether that's as an athlete, a coach, front office, or just a fan. And second, it raises the bar for what we expect from women's sports in this city. We're not talking about borrowing a stadium for a couple of dates and hoping that people show up. We're talking about a purpose-built home, serious investment, and a long-term plan. And third, it gives all of us, as fans, a chance to be there from day one. To say, I remember when it started. I remember that first home match at Mile High. I remember the early signings. I remember the crest when it was announced. That is why I wanted to start this podcast before the season kicks off and not wait until the very first game, because this is the perfect window to get to know the club, to learn the stories behind the owners, the stadium, and the brand. And then over the coming weeks to start going over player by player and building that connection with the roster. So here's what you can expect in the next few episodes. We are going to start a series of a get to know the team. So deep dives where we take one player at a time and talk about who they are, where they came from and what role they're expected to play in year one. And then as more signings are announced, we'll keep adding to that series. As we get closer to that first match, we'll shift into season preview mode. So talking about tactics, formations, key matchups, and where the Summit fits in to the wider NWSL landscape. And once the games start, every week you will get match previews, recaps, and the storylines that you should be watching around the league. So if you are excited about the Denver Summit FC, if you want to feel plugged in before the first whistle blows, and if you want a show that talks about women's soccer like it matters, because it does, well, then you're absolutely in the right place. All right, so that is our very first episode of the 5280 Pitch, Women's Soccer at Altitude. If you enjoyed this, do me a favor. Follow the show on whatever app you're using so you don't miss the next episode. And if you know someone who is already obsessing over Denver Summit, send this to them. Let's build this community together, one listener at a time. You can also find the team's official site, denversummitfc.com, if you want to check out their About page, ticket info, or join Club 5280 and get on the season ticket waitlist. I will be back next time with a full breakdown as we start our Get to Know the Team deep dives. And until then, thank you so much for listening to the 5280 Pitch, Women's Soccer at Altitude.